Here's a quick tutorial on starting to sew together your log cabin quilt. Here's the quilt laid out. You're going to take your center square and your first piece of fabric. And I always do it, I lay the smaller piece on top. So you set your piece of fabric down and you're always going to put right sides together, or pretty sides together. So in this case my red fabric is reversible, so I'll just set it down. But if just for example I was using this piece, I would put the good sides of the fabric face to face like that. So I set my red fabric down and line it up along the left hand edge perfectly. I don't need to worry about lining it up at the top and bottom because I'm going to trim it later. Then I put it under my needle. My machine is set to just a medium stitch length, a straight stitch, and I lower my presser foot. For me, the edge of the presser foot is approximately 1/4 inch. For a log cabin quilt, it's more important to be consistent with your seam allowance and less important that it be a precise 1/4 inch. So I'll just line up the fabric with the edge of the presser foot right there. I always start a little bit behind where I am, so if there's any loose stitches or anything, that gets worked out. It's a good habit to get in the habit of turning your wheel towards yourself to help the machine get started, and then also pressing slowly on the presser foot. So there I go, I'll get started and I'll just sew straight along, keeping that edge straight. I use my left hand to control the fabric to help it move, and then this hand to kind of guide it back and forth, my right hand. I'll keep sewing and I'll sew all the way off the edge. Now if I were sewing several pieces, chain stitching, I'll just show you for the sake of example, I would go ahead and line up the next two pieces good sides together and just keep on stitching right off the end of that fabric and right onto the next one, and then trim it afterwards. I'm not actually sewing these two pieces together, I just wanted to give you an example of how to do the chain stitching. Once I've finished sewing this strip, I pull it out, pull a few inches of thread, and I always get in the habit of trimming close to the project I'm working on with my scissors, so I'm wasting less thread. You want to leave a nice long tail on your machine, and you want to keep your thread on your project trimmed nice and tight. So then I'll trim these in between the two pieces. Now I've got the first two pieces of my log cabin sewn together. I open it up to make sure it looks okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and trim it. You can use your rotary cutter for this if you want to be really precise. Lay your rotary cutter, lay your ruler down and use a rotary cutter to trim, but I'm lazy, so I'll just use the edge of my red square as a guide and trim very neatly with my scissors. You do need to make sure this stays nice and square. You trim both sides. Throw this away. And now you've got what looks like two perfect squares, even though you started with a strip. You take the next piece in your the next piece of fabric for your log cabin, which in this case is this one for me, and then you lay your two pieces joined together down on top, good sides together. And again, lower the feed dog and start to sew. When I quilt, I put both my seam allowances to the same side, and in this case I'm pushing them towards the outside of the quilt square, so away from the center red square. And again, I sew all the way down, keeping a nice even seam allowance. Oh, ideally your machine doesn't gum up. There we go. And again, right off the end, pull the threads out, trim, and open it up to see that I've got it right, despite a little problem with the machine. And that's that. So I'm just going to keep going in this pattern, working my way all the way around until I've got the whole square together.